The exotic game trade has existed in the United States for quite some time. Texas particularly is a stronghold for this industry. There are large populations of sometimes endangered species from all over the world on U.S. soil. I'm going to take a closer look at this thriving industry and its impact on wildlife conservation. Hunting has become a controversial practice in modern times. My name is Dan Cabela, and I'm traveling the globe to explore the true impact that hunting is having on our remaining wild landscapes. This practice goes as far back as human history can remember, but does it have a place in modern conservation? The exotic trade began decades ago. The origins of the exotic industry, especially in Texas, was fueled by surplus animals that came out of public zoos. From there, over time, there became more and more different exotic species. Ranchers began to realize the value. More people started to get into it. And if you look at today, there is a very robust business aspect to the game trading, and specifically some of the more endangered stuff like the Dama gazelles, king and mountain bongo, the addax. A lot of these animals rarely occur in their native lands at this point. There are far higher numbers in Texas than there are in Africa. I'm heading to Mason Mountain Wildlife Management Area to learn more about what it takes to manage exotic game on U.S. soil. And this is a state-owned area that was donated quite a few years back that actually has exotics and native game on it. Morning.
Good morning, Mr.
Hey,
Nice
how
to meet
are
you.
you?
Welcome
Nice
to
to
the
meet
area.
you. Morning. Nice to meet you.
Sir.
Well, at least we picked a beautiful day to do this.
I know.
on.
Absolutely. Come on in. Spring. This is it.
This is the area. It's 5,300 acres, and it was acquired as a donation from a guy who was concerned about conservation. He bought this place in the 80s, and he set this up as a breeding facility for exotic wildlife, mainly African stuff, but it did have some Asian stuff on it also. But at the time, it was pretty unique in that our commission said we had to earn operation and maintenance off the property. We here started looking at, hey, we've got exotics on the place because we inherited them. There's a need to know how to manage these things to some extent and do less amount of damage, you might say, to the native wildlife.
We're a piece of the puzzle out there in a very fragmented landscape, and our role is to teach. That approach has always been based on plants, carrying capacity, and management of land health. It's based on two powerful principles: prescribed fire, which we conduct a lot of, as well as teaching landowners about animal impacts, including exotics here.
So we want to go in the field?
In an increasingly fragmented landscape with competing interests for land use, actively managing land with tools like fire, amongst others, is crucial to maintain functional ecosystems.
Every piece of ground in Texas has been touched. We can't put the original ecosystem back because we can't bring 1 million buffalo through this country.
That's right.
So what you do is you take a piece of property and you try to manage it the best you can for all the native stuff that are still here.
By having wildlife on land, either exotics or native species, it is still possible to maintain functional natural habitats around human development.
All those plants are contributing to structure as well as providing food at the same time. And we're utilizing a grazing impact in these grass systems to open up space and allow forbs or weeds to grow.
By picking a species such as scimitar, they're not attacking the browse. They're not competing for whitetail for those browse and forbs. What they're after is more of the grass that you see back here.
We manage these systems with fire. Our goals here are obviously not to overutilize, but understanding that this land needs animal impact.
This is an area that's burned in the wintertime or cool season every other year. And then this is an area across the road that is burnt typically cool season, but hasn't been burned in about 4 or 5 years.
Well, I appreciate it, guys.
Enjoyed it.
I learned a lot today, and I appreciate you guys taking us around and showing us a different way of doing this.
Right, coming out. Glad to show you.
Exotic game is primarily in the private hands of ranchers in Texas at this point. The buying and selling of these exotics has become a very profitable business. My next stop is one of the largest game breeders in Texas to learn more about how the business works and the industry as a whole. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Dan, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise, nice to see you. In a nutshell, what we're doing is we're creating the full circle. We provide the animals initially to the people that want to buy them. We offer consulting services, and then we offer them the way out when they need to generate income. In 1963, we found an article that talked about there were 13 species in Texas at the time. In 2010, it's estimated that there's 125 non-native species that are living on ranches in Texas. When you start taking into consideration the amount of land that's being used for wildlife habitat here in the state versus growing cotton or pecans or whatever, you know, South Africa, they converted 50 million acres of marginal farmland into native habitat for wildlife, and the very same thing is happening here in Texas right now. I think if you get a chance to see what we're actually doing on one of the ranches versus just sitting here in an office looking at numbers, I think it'll kind of bring this full circle.
I said we go down there, we take a look, and I'm very excited to see what you guys are doing.
Okay.
Brian and I head out in search of a herd of Kenyan mountain bongo that they will be capturing some individuals from. The business model behind the exotic game trade is essentially the breeding of these exotic herds and the trading and selling of them. Because it's privately owned, this is what stimulates the industry, the commerce behind it, the trading and the selling and the demand and the supply. And so you've got very specialized ranchers who manage these populations.
So we're just gonna circle back and go back towards those bongo. I figured we'd come up here real quick, and there's some springbok out there on the hill. There's a group of wildebeest over there. Pat, can you get in with us? Can you start from here?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
On our way, we pick up Tad Honeycutt, who is the capture team manager at Wildlife Partners.
All right, good. Yes, sir.
What's neat about this drug is once it starts taking effect, the animals come to noise. The animal usually gets clinical between 5 and 7 minutes.
They're Kenyan mountain bongo, which are critically endangered. The numbers that remain in the wild, it's not exactly certain, but it's probably somewhere around 100. I estimate that here in the United States, there's somewhere between 600 and 1,000 bongo. As I said earlier, these are Kenyan mountain bongo, which are extremely rare. This female was born here, approximately a year ago, and she's going to a research facility that's going to be studying these bongos. Once we get it caught, we put the blindfold on it just to protect its eyes. and to reduce the stress load. So these are incredibly beautiful animals. They're extraordinarily rare. And here in Texas, they have tremendous value, which is the reason why we breed them and take care of them and allocate space to them and, do all these things to make sure that they're well taken care of. This one animal generates about $100,000 worth of revenue for this ranch, which goes a long ways when you take into consideration there's about 1,500 animals here that we've got to look after and provide veterinary care for and feed. If it were not for the economic value, there's just no way we could do this on the scale that we're doing it now.
1, 2, 3.
The buying and selling of these exotics has become a very profitable business. The demand is high because they're rare and there's not a surplus of inventory. Some people are just hobbyists who do it for the conservation aspect. Others do it for profit. And I also think just the aesthetic value of seeing gazelles and different antelope on a property versus cattle or sheep or goats is appealing to a lot of folks. A total of 2 bongo calves are being captured and relocated to a new property as part of a study to learn more about the species.
Just give it a little more time, should be fine. All right, she's in. Check the sex. All right, same thing. We got second girl here, loaded. She's fixing to go to the trailer, and they're giving all of her vaccines and all that good stuff right now, so it's going good.
It's not hard to generate who's not here doing this. The animals on this ranch pay for this ranch. This ranch doesn't cost me anything. These animals that live here generate enough revenue that they cover the overhead, they cover the feed, the people, everything, and they cover the mortgage.
The trade in species like the Kenyan mountain bongo that are on the brink of extinction in their natural habitats has directly led to preserving viable populations of these highly endangered species in Texas. When you look at it from an economic standpoint, if these animals in their native range had the value that they do in Texas, you'd probably have a little more stable environments for them.
When you look at South Africa and what occurred between the early 1800s all the way through the early 1990s, you had this decimation of wildlife, in large part due to farming, agriculture, and livestock. And then in 1991, privatization occurred with the Game Theft Act, and it gave landowners the ability to extract value from wildlife.
The business model behind the exotic game trade has evolved over time, and recently, auctions have become very lucrative to the exotic game trade. Hey, Will.
Hey, Dan.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, man.
Tell us a little bit about the kind of people that are selling animals here. What kind
So
of ranch?
this is a by invitation only auction. We basically decided we were going to do something that was more along the lines of the things we'd seen in other parts of the world, and so we started doing 2005, 2004. We averaged $8,500 a sable cow across all the sable cows we acquired. And I mean, tomorrow you'll see me sell some for $80,000. I mean, that's a huge amount in 15 years. Some of that's about breeding for quality, and some of that's just demand. It's been great. You know, it helps the value of the animals. Those ranchers are propagating the species, and that's always been the goal, right? It's about conservation and preservation of these species.
Here's your sign right here. 35, 40, 35, 85, 85, 80,000, 85, now 90, 90, 85, 95, 90,000. Boys, y'all pay attention. 100,000. $85, 80,000, 85, now 90, 90, 85, 95, 90,000. Boys, y'all pay attention. 100,000. $100,000. Who's in now? Somebody give 100,000.
The best role that game trading plays for the conservation of these species is the propagating of these species. As these herds grow of these endangered animals, even though they're not in their native environment, there's more of them on the planet. Over time, if things become stable in their native environment, reintroductions could be possible. We own exotics in Texas ourselves. I find it to be very meaningful to have these herds on our properties. We've always had a love of wildlife and have traveled to Africa numerous times. Today is a special day, as our herd will be growing with some new arrivals. We are about to unload 2 roan, a female and a male, young ones, and 3 young female addicts.
Let's go.
Just offloaded a young male and a young female roan. Got off the trailer looking in excellent condition, so things are good, and they'll join the others now, and we'll get this herd started. I personally participate in the industry and own these exotic animals because I enjoy watching these herds grow. The exotic trade industry certainly has conservation value. As these species decline in their native areas, they're growing in the state of Texas. So it's insurance that maybe later down the road, a reintroduction could take place if these environments become stable. As the exotic industry pushes forward, one can only hope that the further expansion of these endangered species is better realized.